I never thought a simple movie night would change everything between us. My name is Daniel, and this is the story of how I realized my best friend Marcus wasn't just my friend anymore. He had become the person I couldn't stop thinking about, the one who made my heart race with just a glance. Marcus and I had been inseparable since our freshman year of college. We met in an orientation icebreaker that neither of us wanted to attend, bonding over our mutual disdain for forced social activities and our shared love of terrible sci-fi movies. From that day forward, we were practically joined at the hip. We studied together, ate together, shared our deepest fears and biggest dreams. He knew everything about me, or so I thought, and I believed. I knew everything about him. Our friendship was the kind people wrote songs about. The kind where you finish each other's sentences and communicate with just a look across a crowded room. Marcus had this way of making me feel seen, truly seen, in a way no one else ever had. When I talked, he didn't just hear me, he listened with his whole being. His dark eyes focused entirely on me, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. He was beautiful in a way that snuck up on you. Not the obvious, magazine cover, kind of handsome, but something deeper. The way his hair fell across his forehead when he was concentrating. The crooked smile that appeared when he was genuinely amused, not just being polite. The gentle strength in his hands when he'd absently touch my shoulder while making a point. I'd noticed these things before, cataloged them in the back of my mind. But I'd never let myself think too deeply about what that noticing meant. That night, the night. Everything changed, started like 100 other nights before it. It was late October, and the autumn chill had settled over our college town with a vengeance. Marcus had texted me around 7, suggesting we have one of our legendary movie marathons. His roommate was gone for the weekend, and my apartment was being fumigated. So his place was the obvious choice. I showed up with snacks and drinks, the usual routine. Marcus answered the door in sweatpants and an old band t-shirt that had seen better days. His feet bare, his hair still damp from a recent shower. The sight of him so casual and comfortable did something strange to my chest. Made my breath catch in a way I couldn't quite explain. "You brought the good chips," he said with that crooked smile, stepping aside to let me in. "This is why we're friends." His apartment smelled like the sandalwood candle his sister had given him, warm and inviting. The lights were already dimmed, and he'd set up his living room like a proper home theater, complete with blankets and pillows arranged on the couch. We settled in, arguing good-naturedly about what to watch first. This was our ritual, the comfortable back and forth that felt as natural as breathing. Eventually, we compromised on a classic horror film neither of us had seen in years. Something campy enough to mock, but entertaining enough to actually watch. Marcus grabbed the biggest blanket he had, a massive, fluffy thing in deep blue, and threw it over both of us. The movie started, and for the first hour, everything was normal. We made our usual commentary, laughing at the outdated special effects and questionable acting choices. But somewhere around the halfway point, I became acutely aware of how close we were sitting. Our thighs were touching under the blanket, just barely, but it felt like that point of contact was radiating heat through my entire body. I tried to focus on the screen, but my attention kept drifting to Marcus. The way the television's flickering light played across his features, the small movements of his chest as he breathed, the occasional laugh that rumbled through him. When had I become so hyper-aware of him? When had his presence shifted from comforting to something that made my pulse quicken? Then came the scene that would replay in my mind for weeks afterward. A jump scare, predictable and not particularly frightening, but Marcus reacted anyway. His hand flying out and landing on my thigh. We both froze. The touch was innocent, instinctive, but neither of us moved. His hand stayed there, warm through the thin fabric of my jeans, his fingers slightly curled. "Sorry," he mumbled, but he didn't pull away. Not immediately. There was a hesitation, a moment where the air between us felt charged with something unspoken. When he finally did remove his hand, it was slowly, almost reluctantly, his fingers trailing just slightly as they left. My skin burned where he'd touched me, even through the denim. The rest of the movie passed in a blur. I couldn't tell you what happened in the final act because I wasn't watching anymore. I was thinking about that touch, about the way my body had responded to it. about the fact that I'd been disappointed when it ended. I was thinking about all the times over the past few months when I'd found excuses to be near him, to touch his arm when I laughed, to sit close enough that our shoulders brushed. When the credits rolled, neither of us moved to turn on the lights. We sat there in the near darkness, the only illumination coming from the menu screen's soft glow. The silence between us felt different than usual, heavier, more meaningful. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, could feel the warmth of Marcus beside me under our shared blanket. "Daniel?" Marcus said quietly, and something in his voice made me turn to look at him. His expression was serious, vulnerable in a way I'd rarely seen. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He took a deep breath, and I watched his chest rise and fall. Have you ever felt something for someone and not known what to do about it?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I was almost afraid to examine. "What do you mean?" I managed, though I had a feeling I knew exactly what he meant. My mouth had gone dry, and I could feel my hands trembling slightly under the blanket. He looked away, staring at the television screen without really seeing it. "I mean, what if you realized you felt something for someone you shouldn't? Someone who's supposed to just be your friend?" His voice was barely above a whisper, and there was a tremor in it that I'd never heard before. "What if you've been feeling it for a while, and you're scared that saying something will ruin everything?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. This was at the moment where something would either break between us or transform into something new. I could play it safe, pretend I didn't understand, keep our friendship exactly as it had always been. Or I could be brave. I could be honest. "Then I guess," I said slowly, carefully, "I'd want to know if that person felt the same way." I turned to face him fully, drawing one leg up onto the couch. Because maybe they've been feeling something too. Maybe they've been lying awake at night thinking about their friend, wondering when exactly friendship started feeling like something more. Marcus's eyes snapped to mine, wide and hopeful and terrified all at once. The television's glow reflected in them, making them seem to shimmer. "Daniel, .. he started, but whatever he'd been about to say died on his lips as we stared at each other. The space between us felt possibly small and impossibly vast at the same time. I could see every detail of his face, the slight stubble on his jaw, the tiny scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident, the way his lips were slightly parted as he struggled to find words. Time seemed to slow down, crystallize into this single, perfect moment of possibility. I think I said, my voice barely audible, that if that person did feel the same way, everything would be okay. Better than okay? It would be ... right. I reached out slowly, giving him every chance to pull away, placed my hand over his where it rested on the blanket between us. His skin was warm, and I could feel his pulse racing under my fingertips. He didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers curled around mine, gripping tight like I was an anchor in a storm. "I've wanted to tell you for months," he confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush now that the dam had broken. "Every time we hung out, every stupid movie night, every late-night conversation, I kept thinking, this is when I'll say something, but I was so scared of losing you." "You're not going to lose me," I assured him, squeezing his hand. "Marcus, you could never lose me." The relief that washed over his face was almost painful to witness. I wanted to close the distance between us, to show him physically what words seemed inadequate to express, but something held me back. Years of conditioning, of society's expectations, of my own fears and insecurities. We sat there, hands intertwined under the blanket. Neither of us quite ready to acknowledge fully what was happening, but both unwilling to let go. "So what do we do now?" Marcus asked with a shaky laugh. I didn't exactly plan past the confession part. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months, like a weight I hadn't fully recognized I was carrying had been lifted. "I don't know. We figure it out together." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was honest. We figured out everything else together. Why should this be different? He nodded, and his smile, his real smile, the one that crinkled the corners of his eyes, broke across his face like sunrise. "Together," he repeated, like he was testing the word, savoring it. I liked the sound of that. His thumb traced small circles on the back of my hand, an absent gesture that sent shivers up my arm. The rest of that night was a blur of conversation, really talking, saying all the things we'd both been too scared to say. We talked about when we'd first started having these feelings, about the moments that had meant more than friendship, but that we'd both tried to rationalize away. For me, it had been a day in early spring when Marcus had fallen asleep during a study session, his head dropping onto my shoulder, and I'd spent 2 hours frozen in place because I couldn't bear to wake him. For Marcus, it had been even earlier a winter night when I'd shown up at his door at 2 in the morning, devastated after a family fight, and he'd held me while I cried. He said that was when he knew what he felt was more than friendship. When the thought of me in pain had physically hurt him, we must have talked for hours. At some point, Marcus suggested we lie down. We were both exhausted, and his neck was getting sore from the angle we were sitting at. We rearranged ourselves on the couch, facing each other now, the blanket still covering us both. The space between us had shrunk to mere inches. I could feel his breath on my face, warm and steady. "This is real, right?" Marcus asked quietly, his eyes searching mine in the darkness. "This isn't just, I don't know, some moment we're going to regret in the morning." There was vulnerability in the question, a fear that mirrored my own. What if we were making a mistake? What if this ruined the best friendship either of us had ever had? But looking at him then, seeing the hope and tenderness in his expression, I couldn't imagine regretting this. "It's real," I confirmed. "At least it is for me. The most real thing I've felt in a long time." My hand was still in his, and I brought our joined hands up between us, studying the way our fingers intertwined. "I don't know what happens next, but I know I don't want to pretend anymore." "Me neither," he agreed. We fell into silence again, but it was comfortable now, charged with anticipation rather than anxiety. The TV had long since gone to its screensaver, casting abstract patterns of color across the room. In that dim, shifting light, Marcus looked almost ethereal, like something from a dream I was afraid to wake from. I'm not sure which of us moved first. Maybe we both did simultaneously, drawn together by some invisible force we'd been resisting for too long. The distance between us closed slowly, giving us both time to change our minds, to pull back to safety. But neither of us did. When our foreheads touched, I felt Marcus's breath hitch, heard the small, almost inaudible sound he made. "Is this okay?" he whispered, and I could feel the words as much as hear them. We were so close. His free hand had somehow found its way to my face, his palm cupping my cheek with a gentleness that made my chest ache. "Tell me this is okay, Daniel." "It's more than okay," I breathed back. And then, finally, inevitably, we kissed. It was soft and tentative at first, both of us uncertain, both of us terrified of doing something wrong. But then Marcus's hand tightened on my cheek and I pressed closer. And suddenly the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home and setting off on an adventure all at once. Time lost all meaning. We might have stayed like that for minutes or hours. I had no way of knowing and no desire to check. All I knew was the warmth of Marcus's mouth on mine, the way his fingers threaded through my hair, the feeling of rightness that suffused every cell of my body. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathing hard, I felt dizzy with happiness. Marcus's eyes were bright, almost glassy, and when he smiled, it was radiant. "I've imagined that so many times," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "In my head, late at night when I couldn't sleep. But the reality is so much better than anything I'd imagined." He kissed me again, quick and sweet this time, like he was testing to make sure he could. That this was really allowed, we spent the rest of the night wrapped up in each other under that blanket, kissing and talking and simply existing in this new reality we'd created. We must have eventually fallen asleep because I woke up to weak morning light filtering through the blinds and Marcus's arm draped over my waist, his face buried in the back of my neck. For a moment, panic seized me. What had we done? We'd crossed a line we could never uncross. Our friendship would never be the same. But then Marcus stirred, pressing a sleepy kiss to my shoulder. "Emmed up, morning," in a voice rough with sleep, and I realized I didn't want it to be the same. This, whatever this was, felt right in a way nothing else ever had. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment and discovery. We decided not to hide what was between us, though we were careful about who we told and how. Some people were supportive immediately. My sister, who'd always adored Marcus, practically cheered when I told her. A few of our friends admitted they'd suspected something for months and were just glad we'd finally figured it out ourselves. But not everyone was accepting. Marcus's father, a man I'd met several times and always found intimidating, took the news poorly when Marcus finally worked up the courage to tell him. The fallout from that conversation left Marcus withdrawn and hurting for days. I wanted to fix it, to make it better, but all I could do was be there, holding him when he needed to be held, giving him space when he needed to process. "Not you," he'd assured me one particularly difficult night. We were in my apartment, and he'd been uncharacteristically quiet all evening. "I don't regret any of this. I don't regret us. I knew it would be hard, but knowing and living through it are two different things." His eyes were red-rimmed, and it killed me to see him in such pain. I pulled him close, pressing my lips to his temple. "We'll get through it," I promised. "Whatever comes, we face it together. Remember?" I echoed the promise we'd made to each other that first night, the vow that had seen us through every challenge since. He nodded against my shoulder. I felt some of the tension leave his body. Together, he repeated the word that had become our touchstone. I liked the sound of that. It was the same thing he'd said that first night. And hearing it again reminded us both of how far we'd come. Our relationship evolved in ways both expected and surprising. We had to learn a new dynamic. Figure out how to be together romantically while preserving the friendship that had been our foundation. There were awkward moments and misunderstandings, times when old patterns clashed with new realities. But through it all, the core of what we had, the trust, the understanding, the genuine affection remained solid. One of the biggest challenges came from an unexpected source: jealousy. Marcus had always been naturally charismatic, the kind of person who drew others to him without trying. I'd watched people fall a little bit in love with him for years without it bothering me. But now that he was mine, now that I had the right to be bothered, I found myself struggling with irrational surges of possessiveness. It came to a head at a party about 2 months into our relationship. We'd gone together, not hiding our connection, but not advertising it either. Marcus had gotten separated from me in the crowd, and when I found him, he was deep in conversation with a guy I didn't recognize. The stranger was clearly flirting, leaning into Marcus's space, touching his arm when he laughed. The rational part of my brain knew Marcus wasn't encouraging it. He'd stepped back, created distance, his body language clearly uncomfortable. But the irrational part, the part that was still adjusting to having something precious I could lose, saw only the threat. I felt my jaw clench, my hands curl into fists at my sides. Marcus noticed me watching and immediately extracted himself from the conversation, crossing the room to where I stood. "Hey," he said with a smile that faded when he saw my expression. "What's wrong?" He reached for my hand, a gesture that had become second nature to both of us, but I pulled away. "Who was that?" The words came out harsher than I'd intended, sharp with an emotion I didn't want to name. Marcus's eyebrows rose in surprise, and something flickered in his eyes. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. "Just some guy from my economics class," he said carefully. He was asking about the assignment due next week. Studied my face, and I watched understanding dawn. "Daniel, you're not. Are you jealous?" There was disbelief in his voice, as if the idea of me being jealous was absurd. I wanted to deny it, to play it off as nothing, but we'd built our relationship on honesty. "Maybe," I admitted reluctantly. "He was all over you." Even as I said it, I knew I was being unreasonable. Marcus had done nothing wrong. This was my issue, my insecurity talking. Marcus's expression softened, and he reached for me again. This time I let him take my hand, let him pull me slightly away from the crowded room and into a quieter hallway. "Hey," he said gently, ducking his head to meet my eyes. "Look at me." When I finally did, his gaze was steady and sure. "There's no one else. It's just you. Do you understand that?" "I know," I said, feeling foolish now. "I'm sorry. I saw him touching you, and I didn't know how to finish the sentence." how to explain the sudden, overwhelming fear that had gripped me. Fear that I wasn't enough. Fear that Marcus would realize he could do better than his best friend, who'd taken years to figure out what was right in front of him. You got scared? Marcus finished for me. And the understanding in his voice made my chest tight. Daniel, I get it. This is new for both of us. But you need to trust that I'm in this. Completely. I didn't wait years to tell you how I felt, just to throw it away at some party. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. You're stuck with me. The simple affirmation, delivered with such sincerity, dissolved the last of my jealous anger. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and pulled Marquez into a hug, not caring who might see. I'm sorry, I murmured into his shoulder. I trust you.
I do.
I just need to work on trusting myself. He held me tighter, and I felt him nod. We'll work on it together, he promised. Okay, and there was that word again, together. Our constant reminder that we were a team, that we faced everything side by side. Can we go home now? I'm kind of over this party. We left, walking back to my apartment hand in hand under the streetlights. The night air was crisp and clear, the kind of perfect autumn evening that made you feel alive. As we walked, Marcus told me about the ridiculous conversation he'd had with the guy from his class. How the flirting had been as uncomfortable for him as it had been for me to watch. I kept trying to work you into the conversation, he said with a laugh. Like, oh yeah, my boyfriend loves that movie, and my boyfriend and I went to that restaurant last week. I think I said boyfriend about 15 times in 5 minutes. He glanced at me. Suddenly uncertain. I hope that's okay? Calling you that? I know we haven't really put labels on things. The question made me smile. More than okay, I assured him. I like being your boyfriend. The word felt foreign on my tongue, but also completely natural, like something I'd been meant to say all along. Though maybe 15 times in 5 minutes is overkill. I was trying to be clear. Marcus protested with mock indignation. The guy was not picking up on subtle hints. We both laughed, and the last remnants of the evening's tension finally dissipated. By the time we reached my apartment, everything felt right again. The brief storm passed and forgotten. That night, as we lay in my bed together, Marcus traced idle patterns on my arm with his fingertips. You know what's weird? He said thoughtfully. This doesn't feel weird. Being with you like this feels like the most natural thing in the world. Like we should have been doing this all along. His voice was quiet in the darkness, contemplative. It doesn't feel weird to me either, I agreed. I turned to face him, able to make out his features in the dim light from the street, filtering through my curtains. Sometimes I try to remember what it was like before, when we were just friends. And I can remember the facts of it, the things we did and said. But I can't remember what it felt like. Like my heart's been rewritten to only know this. Marcus's breath caught, and even in the low light I could see the emotion shining in his eyes. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, he whispered. Daniel Chen, secret romantic. Who knew? He was teasing, but his voice was thick with feeling. I'm a lot of things I didn't know I was, I admitted. Before you. You make me want to be better, braver. You make me want to say the cheesy romantic stuff instead of keeping it locked inside. I paused, gathering my courage for what I wanted to say next. You make me believe in us in a way I've never believed in anything. You didn't need words after that. Marquez kissed me slow and deep, his hands gentle as they mapped the familiar terrain of my face, my neck, my shoulders. There was an intimacy to it that went beyond the physical, a sense of souls touching in the darkness. When we finally settled into sleep, wrapped around each other like we were afraid the night might separate us, I felt a contentment I'd never known before. The semester progressed, and with it, our relationship deepened and matured. We learned each other in new ways. What made the other person laugh at 3 a.m. when we should have been sleeping? Learned how to fight fair when disagreements arose. Learned the language of comfort that existed in touches and glances. There were magical moments scattered through the ordinary days. Like the time it snowed unexpectedly in early December. And Marcus dragged me outside at midnight to catch snowflakes on our tongues like children. Both of us laughing so hard we could barely breathe. Or the evening I came down with a terrible cold, and Marcus showed up with soup and medicine and spent the whole night taking care of me. Never once complaining about my sniffling or whining, But there were hard moments too. Times when the weight of being different, of loving someone the world didn't always accept, felt crushing. We got stares sometimes when we held hands in public, heard whispered comments that were meant to hurt. There were days when Marcus's father still wouldn't take his calls, and days when my own anxiety about the future threatened to overwhelm the happiness of the present. Through it all, we held on to each other and to the promise we'd made. Together, no matter what came, we'd face it together. It became more than just a word. It became our philosophy, our commitment, our declaration that what we had was worth fighting for. December brought finals, and with them, the stress of a semester coming to an end. Marcus and I studied together like we always had, but now, study breaks involve kissing, the kind of comfortable silence that only comes when you're completely at ease with another person. We quizzed each other on exam material and made deals for every correct answer. The other person owed a kiss. It was a foolish game that made studying take twice as long as it should have, but neither of us cared. The night before my last final, I was a wreck. The exam was for my hardest class, and despite weeks of preparation, I was convinced I was going to fail. Marcus found me in the library at 11 p.m., surrounded by textbooks and notes, my head in my hands, and very close to tears of frustration. "Hey," he said softly, sitting down next to me. "You need a break. What's in a question?" He started gathering my materials, ignoring my protests. "Daniel, you know this stuff? You've been studying for weeks. What you need right now isn't more cramming, it's rest and perspective." But I started, but he cut me off with a look that was both gentle and firm. It was a look I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant he was going to take care of me whether I liked it or not. "You're exhausted, you're stressed, and you're not going to retain anything else tonight. We're going back to your place. You're going to get some sleep. And tomorrow, you're going to ace this exam because you're brilliant and you've put in the work." Which confidence in me was absolute, unshakable. And something about that certainty settled the panic that had been rising in my chest. We went back to my apartment, and Marcus made me tea and put on soft music and basically forced me to relax. "Tell me about something else," he suggested as we sat on my bed, both of us leaning against the wall, his hand warm in mine. "Tell me about something good. Something that has nothing to do with exams or school or stress." So I told him about the cabin my family owned upstate, a place we'd gone every summer when I was a kid. I described the lake and the woods, the way the sunlight looked filtering through the pine trees, the absolute stillness of being somewhere so removed from the rest of the world. "I haven't been there in years," I admitted, "but I used to love it. It was the one place where I felt like I could completely be myself." Marcus listened with that focused attention he always gave me, his thumb absently stroking the back of my hand. "We should go there sometime," he said when I finished. "Next summer, maybe. I'd like to see it." The casual way he said it, like our future together was a given, like of course we'd still be together months from now, made my heart swell. "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it. The image of Marcus at the cabin, of sharing that space with him, felt right in a way that made me understand just how serious this was for me. How serious he was, I'd really like that. We talked late into the night about everything and nothing. Somewhere in the middle of a story about his childhood dog, I realized I was in love with him. Not just the new, exciting attraction that had brought us together, but something deeper and more enduring. I loved his laugh, his kindness, his stubborn determination when he believed in something. I loved the way he saw the world and the way he saw me. I loved all of it, all of him, with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified me. I must have gone quiet because Marcus nudged me gently. "Where'd you go?" he asked. "You got this look on your face, like you were a million miles away." His eyes searched mine, concerned and curious in equal measure. "I was right here," I assured him, but my heart was racing. Should I tell him? Was it too soon? We'd only been together for a few months, but the words were pressing against my ribs, demanding to be said. "Marcus, I stopped, suddenly nervous. What if he wasn't ready to hear it? What if it scared him away?" "What is it?" he prompted gently, shifting to face me more fully. "You can tell me anything. You know that." The simple truth of that statement, The absolute trust between us gave me the courage I needed. "I love you," I said, the words coming out in a rush. "I'm in love with you. I know it's only been a few months, and maybe it's too soon to say it. But it's true, and I needed you to know." My hands were trembling slightly, and I resisted the urge to look away from his intense gaze. For a long moment, Marcus just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the most beautiful smile I'd ever seen, radiant and filled with joy. "Thank God," he breathed. "I've been wanting to say it for weeks, but I was scared it was too soon." He cupped my face in his hands, his touch infinitely tender. "I love you too, Daniel. So much it sometimes scares me." The kiss that followed was different from all the ones before it. It was a promise and a declaration, sealed with the words we'd finally had the courage to speak. When we broke apart, we were both grinning like idiots, giddy with the relief of reciprocated feelings. "Say it again," Marcos requested, his forehead pressed to mine. "I want to hear it again." There was a playful note in his voice, but also genuine desire. He wanted the words, wanted the reassurance they provided. "I love you," I repeated, happy to oblige. "I love you, I love you, I love you." I punctuated each declaration with a kiss, and Marcus laughed, bright and unfettered. The sound filling my small apartment with warmth, we stayed up talking until nearly 3 in the morning, unable to stop touching each other, unable to stop saying those 3 words that had changed everything once again. When we finally fell asleep, tangled together in my too small bed, I felt a peace I'd never experienced before. This was right. He was right. We were right. I did ace my final the next day. Riding high on love and confidence, and the 8 hours of solid sleep Marcus had insisted I get, when I texted him the good news, he responded with a string of celebration emojis and a promise to take me out to dinner that night to celebrate the end of the semester. Dinner turned into a long walk through the city, looking at Christmas lights and talking about our plans for winter break. Marcus was going home to see his family, to continue trying to build bridges with his father. I was doing the same with mine, though thankfully my parents had been more accepting. We'd be apart for 3 weeks, the longest we'd been separated since we got together. "I'm going to miss you," I admitted as we walked, our breath misting in the cold December air. 3 weeks feels like forever right now. It was silly, probably, to be so affected by a temporary separation, but the thought of not seeing him, not touching him, not falling asleep next to him for that long made my chest ache. "I'll miss you too," Marcus said, pulling me closer. We were in a quieter part of town, few people around to witness the affection, but we'll text and call, and it'll go fast. And then we'll have the whole spring semester together. Paused, then added more quietly, and maybe next year we could look at getting an apartment together? If you want to? The suggestion made my heart skip. Living together. Waking up next to him every morning. Building a life together in that tangible, day-to-day way. "I'd want that," I said, unable to keep the smile off my face. "I'd want that a lot." We spent our last evening before break together, not wanting to waste a single moment. Marcus gave me a gifted leather-bound journal he'd noticed me admiring weeks ago at a bookstore. "For your thoughts," he said, as I ran my hands over the smooth cover. "I know you like to write sometimes, to work things out on paper. I thought maybe this could be a place for that." I gave him a scarf I'd knitted myself, a project I'd been working on secretly for weeks. It was far from perfect. There were a few dropped stitches, and one section where the tension was clearly off. But Marcus wrapped it around his neck like it was the most precious thing he'd ever received. "You made this for me," he said, sounding awed. "Daniel, this is... No one's ever made me something before. Get used to it," I told him with a smile. "I'm going to be making you things and doing sappy romantic gestures for a long time. That's what you signed up for." I was trying to keep it light, but emotion was thick in my throat. This was it. In a few hours, we'd say goodbye for 3 weeks. We kissed goodbye at the train station, neither of us caring about the people rushing past with their luggage and last-minute travel stress. "I love you," Marcus said against my lips. "I'll call you when I get home." One more kiss. Lingering and bittersweet, and then he was boarding. Turning to wave at me through the window as the train pulled away, the 3 weeks apart were harder than I'd anticipated. We texted constantly and video called every night, but it wasn't the same as having him physically present. I missed the small things, the way he hummed while he cooked, the warmth of his hand in mine, the solid reality of him next to me. The separation made me realize just how much he'd become a part of my daily life, how thoroughly he'd woven himself into my existence. But the time apart also gave me perspective. I watched my parents interact, saw the quiet love that existed after 30 years of marriage, the inside jokes, the comfortable silences, the way they moved around each other in the kitchen like a well-rehearsed dance. That's what I wanted with Marcus. Not just the exciting beginning phase, but the deep, enduring partnership that came from choosing each other every day for years. Christmas came and went. My family asked about Marcus constantly, and I found myself talking about him whenever given the opportunity. My mother smiled at the obvious affection in my voice. "You really love him," she observed one evening as we did dishes together. It wasn't a question. "I really do," I confirmed. There was no hesitation, no doubt. Loving Marcus had become as natural and necessary as breathing. I know we're young, and people probably think it's too soon to feel this certain about someone, but I've never been more sure of anything. My mother dried her hands and pulled me into a hug. "Then hold on to it," she advised. Real love doesn't come around every day. When you find it, you fight for it. You work at it, and you never, ever take it for granted. Words stayed with me, became something I turned over in my mind during the remaining days of break. When Marcus and I finally reunited at the start of the spring semester, it was like coming home. We fell into each other's arms at the train station, neither of us speaking for a long moment, just holding on. "I missed you so much," Marcus finally said, his face buried in my neck. "God, 3 weeks is way too long." "Agreed," I said emphatically. "We're never doing that again if we can help it." I pulled back just far enough to kiss him, pouring 3 weeks of missing him into the contact. Around us, the station continued its usual chaos. But we existed in our own bubble, oblivious to everything except each other. The spring semester brought new challenges and new joys. We officially moved in together in February, finding a small but cozy apartment halfway between campus and where we both worked part-time. The process of combining our lives in such a concrete way was both exciting and occasionally frustrating. We had to learn to navigate shared space, figure out division of chores, compromise on everything from thermostat settings to what constituted an acceptable level of kitchen cleanliness. Our first real fight happened over something. Stupid, I'd forgotten to pay my portion of the utilities, and Marcus had covered it without saying anything. But his silence on the matter had felt like judgment to my anxious brain. What started as a simple discussion escalated into an argument where old insecurities and communication issues bubbled to the surface. "I just don't understand why you didn't tell me," I said, frustration making my voice sharp. "I would have paid you back immediately if I'd known." We were in our kitchen, the small space feeling even smaller with the tension between us. "Because it wasn't a big deal," Marcus shot back. "I didn't want you to stress about it. You had midterms and work," and he stopped, running a hand through his hair in agitation. "I was trying to help, Daniel." "I'm sorry if that was wrong." "It's not wrong to help," I said, forcing myself to calm down. "But I need you to communicate with me. We're partners. That means we handle things together, even the mundane stuff like bills." I took a breath, tried to approach this more rationally. "I don't need you to protect me from stress. I need you to trust that I can handle my responsibilities." Something in my words seemed to reach him. His shoulders dropped, and the fight went out of his expression. "You're right," he admitted. I guess I've been treating you like you're fragile sometimes. Like if I burden you with too much, you'll crack. But that's not fair to you, is it? It's not treating you like an equal partner." "No, it's not," I agreed, but my voice was gentler now. I moved closer, reaching for his hand. "I love that you want to take care of me, but taking care of each other goes both ways. It means trusting me to be strong enough to handle the difficult things too." We talked it through, really communicated in a way we hadn't been. It wasn't comfortable or easy, but it was necessary. By the time we finished, we understood each other better, had established clearer expectations and boundaries. We sealed the resolution with a hug that turned into more, both of us needing the physical reassurance that we were okay, that we could fight and come through it stronger. "I love you," Marcus murmured against my hair. "Even when I'm frustrated with you, even when we're fighting, I love you. That doesn't change." His arms tightened around me, and I felt the truth of his words in the way he held me. "I love you too," I said. "And I'm glad we can talk about this stuff. That we don't just let it fester." I pulled back to look at him. "We're going to have more fights. That's just part of being together. But as long as we keep talking, keep being honest with each other, we'll be okay." He nodded, and his small smile returned. "Together," he said, invoking our touchstone word. Through fights and bills and whatever else life throws at us, spring bloomed outside our windows, bringing with it a sense of renewal and growth. Our relationship had weathered its first real storm and emerged intact. We established routines and rituals: Sunday morning breakfast together, Wednesday night movie marathons, Friday evenings at our favorite coffee shop where we'd work on projects side by side. We met each other's extended families. I endured the well-meaning but invasive questions from Marcus's grandmother, who wanted to know everything about my intentions toward her grandson. Marcus, in turn, survived my uncle's protective interrogation and my cousin's relentless teasing. Through it all, we presented a united front, our hands intertwined under tables, our glances full of private understanding. There were beautiful moments scattered through those months, like the night in April when Marcus surprised me with a homemade dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, but he'd set the table with candles and put on soft music. "Just because," he said when I asked what the occasion was, "because I love you and wanted to do something nice." Or the afternoon I came home stressed from a difficult day at work to find that Marcus had run me a bath, complete with the fancy bath salts his sister had given him at Christmas. "Go relax," he'd ordered, practically pushing me toward the bathroom. "I've got dinner covered. You just focus on unwinding." These acts of care and thoughtfulness became the fabric of our relationship, just as important as the grand romantic gestures. We learned that love wasn't always about big dramatic moments. It was also about remembering to buy the specific brand of coffee the other person liked, about leaving encouraging notes in each other's textbooks, about the gentle touches and quiet companionship of shared space. As the semester wound down, we started planning our summer. We'd both gotten internships in the city, which meant we could stay in our apartment rather than going home. And, more importantly, we were finally going to take that trip to my family's cabin that we'd talked about months ago. 2 weeks, I said as we looked at the calendar together, trying to figure out logistics. Just us, the lake, no responsibilities. It's going to be perfect. I was already imagining it: morning swims in the lake, lazy afternoons reading on the porch, evenings cooking together in the small cabin kitchen. "I can't wait," Marcus said, pulling me close. 2 weeks of uninterrupted time with you sounds like heaven." He kissed the top of my head, and I relaxed into his embrace. This casual affection, this comfortable intimacy, had become my favorite thing. The way we fit together, the way touching each other had become as natural as breathing. The trip to the cabin in July was everything I'd hoped for and more. The place was exactly as I remembered, rustic and cozy. Surrounded by towering pines, the lake stretching out crystal clear in front of the small dock. Marquez fell in love with it immediately, which made me fall in love with it all over again through his eyes. We spent those 2 weeks existing outside of normal time and space. We swam every day, the cold lake water shocking and invigorating. We hiked the trails I'd explored as a child, Marcus's hand warm in mine as we walked. We cooked together, read together, talked for hours about everything and nothing. There was no internet, no social media, no outside world intruding, just us and the woods and the absolute contentment of being together. One night, lying on the dock under a sky full of stars, Marcus turned to me with an expression of such profound happiness that it took my breath away. "Thank you for bringing me here," he said quietly. "For sharing this place with me. I know it's special to you, and it means everything that you wanted to share it with me. You're special to me," I replied simply. "The most special. Of course, I wanted to share it with you." I laced our fingers together, both of us staring up at the vastness of the night sky. I want to share everything with you, Marcus. This place, my life, my future, all of it. He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Do you ever think about the future? Like really think about it? Where we'll be in 5 years, 10 years? There was something vulnerable in the question, like he was afraid of my answer. All the time, I admitted. I think about us graduating, getting jobs, maybe getting a place with a better kitchen so you can really cook the way you like to. I think about meeting your family again next Christmas and them finally being fully comfortable with us. I think about growing old with you, weirdly enough. Like I can picture us in 40 years, sitting on a porch somewhere, still holding hands and still finishing each other's sentences. Marcus's breath hitched, and when I turned to look at him, I saw tears glistening in his eyes, illuminated by starlight. That's what I want to, he said. Exactly that. All of it. He pulled me closer, and we lay there under the stars, planning a future that felt both impossibly distant and achingly real. The rest of our time at the cabin passed too quickly. On our last day, we took one final swim, both of us reluctant to leave this bubble we'd created. We'll come back, Marcus promised as we locked up the cabin. Next summer, and the summer after that. This can be our place, our tradition. The drive back to the city felt like re-entering the real world after a dream. But instead of that being sad, it felt right. We were taking the peace and contentment we'd found at the cabin with us, carrying it back into our everyday lives. The real world held challenges, yes, but it also held our apartment, our friends, our work and studies, all the pieces that made up our life together as summer transitioned into fall and our final year of college began. I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in such a relatively short time. A year and a half ago, Marcus had been my best friend, someone I cared about deeply, but in a way I thought was purely platonic. Now he was my partner, my home, the person I couldn't imagine living without. We'd grown together in ways I couldn't have predicted. We'd learned to fight fair and love fiercely. We'd built a life from scratch, learning by doing, making mistakes, and correcting them. We'd proven to each other and to ourselves that what we had was real and lasting, strong enough to weather whatever came our way. Hey, Marcus said one October evening as we sat on our small balcony, watching the sunset. Do you remember that night? The movie night, when everything changed? His tone was casual, but there was meaning in the question. That night had become almost mythical to us, the before and after marker of our relationship. Of course I remember, I said. How could I forget? It was the night I stopped lying to myself about how I felt about you. I smiled at the memory we'd come so far from those nervous, tentative beginnings. Why do you ask? Because I was thinking about how scared I was that night, Marcus admitted. How convinced I was that telling you the truth would ruin everything. And instead, it gave me everything I'd ever wanted. He turned to look at me, his eyes warm. It made me think about how often we almost don't say the things we need to say because we're afraid, and how that fear, as legitimate as it feels, can keep us from the best things in life. I nodded, understanding what he was getting at. You're right. If either of us had let fear win that night, we'd have missed out on all of this. I gestured between us, encompassing not just our relationship, but our entire life together. It makes me want to be braver about everything. To not let fear make my decisions. Exactly, Marcus agreed. He took my hand, his thumb tracing familiar patterns on my skin. So, in the spirit of being brave, I want you to know that I'm in this for the long haul. I know we're young, and people will say, we can't possibly know what we want yet, but I know I want you. In 5 years, in 10 years, in 50 years. You're it for me, Daniel Chen. The declaration settled over me like a warm blanket, comforting and right. You're it for me too, I said, my voice steady with certainty. I've never been more sure of anything. I leaned over to kiss him. Soft and sweet, a promise sealed between us as the sun set on another ordinary, extraordinary day. Our final year of college flew by in a blur of classes, job applications, and preparations for the next phase of our lives. We navigated the stress of senior year together, supporting each other through late-night study sessions and the anxiety of uncertain futures. When Marcus got accepted to a graduate program in the city, we celebrated like it was the best news we'd ever received. When I landed a job at a company I'd been dreaming about working for, Marcus was prouder than I was. We moved to a bigger apartment that summer after graduation. This one, with room for both of us to have workspaces and a kitchen Marcus could finally spread out in properly. It felt like another milestone, another step forward in the life we were building together. We threw a housewarming party and watched our friends fill the space with laughter and warmth. And I remember thinking that this was what happiness looked like. Not a single perfect moment, but a collection of good days and the people you chose to share them with. Looking back now, from the vantage point of years later, I can say with absolute certainty that choosing us was the best decision I ever made. Our relationship hasn't always been easy. We've had moments of doubt, times when the world pushed back against us, periods where we've had to fight to keep what we had. But through everything, we've held on to that promise we made, together, that night under the blanket. When we were still just friends, teetering on the edge of something more. When Marcus asked his question, and I chose to be brave with my answer, that was the night that changed everything. Not just our relationship status, but the entire trajectory of my life. It taught me that sometimes the scariest thing and the right thing are the same thing. That love is worth the risk of vulnerability. That the people we think we know best can surprise us and save us and complete us in ways we never imagined. Marcus is asleep next to me as I write this. His arm draped across my waist, his breathing deep and even. We've been together for years now, and yet my heart still skips when I look at him. Some things I've learned don't fade with familiarity, they deepen, become more precious, more essential. If I could go back and tell my younger self anything, it would be this: say yes to the movie night. Say yes to the conversation under the blanket. Say yes to the terrifying, exhilarating leap into the unknown. Because on the other side of fear is everything you've ever wanted. On the other side of fear is home, and that's our story, or at least the beginning of it. The part where two friends became something more, where fear transformed into courage, where a single night under a blanket changed the course of two lives forever. If you made it this far, thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for witnessing our story, for holding space for the love between two people who were brave enough to reach for what they wanted. What did you think? Did our story resonate with you? Have you ever had a moment like that where everything hung in the balance, where one choice could change everything? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. It helps more people find stories like this one. Stories about love and courage and finding your person against all odds. And here's a question for you. Would you like to hear more about Daniel and Marcus? Should I make a part 2 showing what happens next in their journey, the challenges they face, the milestones they reach, the life they continue to build together? Let me know in the comments. If there's enough interest, I'd love to continue their story. Until next time, remember, sometimes the scariest conversations lead to the most beautiful destinations. Be brave. Speak your truth. You never know what magic might be waiting on the other side. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.